Friends, hello everyone. This is Vitaly Portnikov. Donald Trump, responding to a journalist's question about whether he would order the capture of Russian President Vladimir Putin, said that he had no need to capture Vladimir Putin. It is obvious that the journalist's question was inspired by the U.S. operation to detain the Venezuelan dictator Nicolás Maduro. Trump and Putin. It is clear that Trump is not going to capture the Russian president. However, the very fact that such questions are being asked within the White House press environment is already extremely bad news for the Russian ruler. This explains why his propagandists are so nervous, threatening the United States with World War III and total destruction. How Putin is perceived. The key point is that the American media now perceives Putin as just another petty dictator who allows himself to mock the United States. Leading American journalists suggest that the Russian president could share the fate of his allies. For example, Bashar al-Assad, whose regime is expected to fall, forcing him to flee and hide in Russia. Or Maduro, who failed to make it to Rostov and now has to testify in an American court. Incidentally, the list of Putin's allies who may end up either in Russia or in court could expand to include Iran's leadership, which is clinging to power amid a bloody confrontation with its own people. Putin's inability to help his allies. As we can see, Putin is unable to help those who rely on him. It is one thing to bomb Aleppo or peaceful neighborhoods in Kharkiv, and quite another to confront real geopolitical players who do not see the Russian president as a worthy adversary. Of course, they still look for ways to negotiate with him and profit together. However, at the same time, they are no longer afraid to seize a vessel that the Russian leadership openly declared to be its own tanker, sailing under its own flag. The question of Putin's fate. Perhaps the fact that American special forces were not afraid to seize a tanker Russia claimed as its own encouraged U.S. media to speculate about whether Trump could capture Putin himself. Given the sympathies the American president may have toward the Russian ruler, such questions are appealing to him. They remind Trump that he is the undisputed political leader of the modern world. So why should he be embarrassed by questions about the possible capture of the Russian president? The real threat to Putin. At this moment, Putin's main concern is not whether American special forces will storm his residence in Vitaliy or whether it will be struck by Ukrainian drones. What truly matters to him is preserving the financial capacity of his state to continue the war against Ukraine amid increasing pressure from the United States and other Western countries. Of course, we know that the Russian president may ignore the state of his economy and fail to understand that continuing a brutal war against Ukraine requires not only people willing to sell themselves for money and kill their neighbors, but also the money itself. Each new round of sanctions imposed by the civilized world on one of the most brutal states of our time reduces his ability to continue this war. There is also a trap here for the Russian ruler. Any dictatorship must keep its population at a minimal level of survival. As long as this level is maintained, a ruling power waging wars faces no serious questions from society. This is especially true in Russia, where people have long been raised on unjust and cruel wars of conquest. But once the authorities can no longer keep people afloat, once they can offer even a chance of survival in wartime, dissent begins to grow. It emerges both among ordinary people who consider themselves apolitical but have allowed their leaders to commit vile crimes, and among elites who, after a certain point, stop fearing the dictator's wrath and realize that keeping him in power is more dangerous to their wealth and survival than risking confrontation with a man who has lost touch with reality. I believe no one in Russia doubts that Putin lost touch with reality long ago. However, he has yet not crossed the line that would trigger Russia's rapid collapse, destroy any hope for a normal life, and eliminate the possibility of recovery. If Western sanctions work, if Trump is not afraid to impose tariffs on those who support Russia's energy sector, forcing them to stop buying Russian oil, bankrupting Russian oil companies, and crippling Russia's refining industry. If Ukrainian forces receive accurate coordinates to destroy Russian refineries and shadow fleet tankers, and the United States continues to seize them, then the Russian regime may face serious and inevitable trouble. In such circumstances, Putin will have a much bigger problem than fears of his agents seizing Trump. Because in Russia, nothing changes for decades, and then a bloody, senseless revolt erupts, with the leader becoming its first victim. At that point, Putin will fear Russians, not Americans. Their brutality may exceed even his darkest expectations. So Putin should be careful with his games with Donald Trump. Thank you, friends. Stay tuned, subscribe, follow me on social media and on Patreon, which helps develop these platforms. Use the YouTube sponsorship feature. Victory and peace to you. Good luck.